Is the iPhone 14 Pro really Pro? Is it packed with the features it needs to have to really compete with those latest and greatest flagships from the Android side? Or could the iPhone 14, and really all of Apple's products, take some influence or just blatantly steal some of the best features coming out of Google, Samsung, and dare I even say it, Microsoft too? So as we always do here on the Apple Circle, let's break down the latest Apple leaks, news, and rumors that you need to know about, including 10 or so of the biggest features that Apple should just sort of steal from the competition to make their products better. Curious to see if you guys agree with me or not, so let's just jump right in. Now let me start by saying that in my opinion, I think Apple is just sort of crushing it in 2022. They are more open and they're allowing for more customization in their software and in their ecosystem than they ever have before, and it's really nice to see. And the Mac lineup specifically is better than it's ever been before, even with these new Apple Silicon chips inside and the designs. It's truly a top-notch experience. Seriously. But with that being said, there are still a lot of things that Apple could improve on. There are some design elements and some features and some ports and just some really big things that Apple's missing. The competition is doing really, really well. Give credit where credit's due. Samsung, Google, Vivo, Nothing, OnePlus, all these companies are doing some really great things that Apple could learn a thing or two from, and whether they decide to take some influence or they blatantly rip it off, that is up to your interpretation. But I think that there's a lot of things that Apple could learn and copy from these companies to make their products even better, and really specifically to make the iPhone 14 Pro really worthy of that Pro name, and of course, the Pro price tag too. For example, one of the first things that I'd love to see on a true Pro iPhone is the removal of the notch. I don't want to see the regular notch, the double hole punch notch. I don't want to see any cutout or obstruction on the phone at all. And I think having just this unobstructed, just beautiful glass panel would be really, really nice to see. And obviously Apple's got a little bit of work to do here. They obviously have this super advanced Face ID system that isn't really the same as comparing it to an Android phone. So maybe Android phone makers can do it and Apple can't. It's not really an apples to apples comparison. And even if it might not be a one-to-one comparison, we've seen plenty of Android phone makers come up with some really creative ways to hide that front-facing selfie camera. I know the notch isn't a huge deal for everyone, but for me, when I think of a Pro phone, I think of just one beautiful OLED panel and nothing to sort of distract me and take me away. Also, speaking of Face ID, two other little side notes here. One, the fact that it's been 5 years since Face ID was announced and it's still not on the Mac still boggles my mind, and know that there are some theories and reasons as to why this is technically impossible and why Apple isn't doing it, but I'll come back to that more in a second. And also, Face ID is wonderful. I love the system. It's very accurate, it's very fast, but on a Pro phone, why not have and harness the full power of the Face ID and Touch ID system, giving users the choice to use one, the other, or even both if they really want to lock down their flagship iPhone. Now, one of the other really important things here that would set the iPhone 14 Pro apart from the other phones in the lineup is some kind of major change to design. We have heard reports that Apple is really looking to this year, sort of starting this year and moving forward, really separate their Pro devices from their non-Pro devices. And whether it is a redesign or it's a form factor change or something for the Pro and iPhone, that would be not only very nice to see, but would really make that phone feel way more Pro. And obviously everybody is speculating on what this could mean, what we could see with the iPhone 15, what Apple could do. There have been reports that Apple's gonna do sort of this iPhone 4 style redesign. Maybe we see that with the iPhone 15, where you've got the round volume buttons, you've got the glass back, you've got the camera flush against the back, you've even got sort of that speaker mesh, that speaker grill on the bottom of the phone. That would be very nice to see, and that's a direction Apple could certainly take. Or maybe they go a little bit more extreme and they do some other sort of change to the form factor. Maybe it is a flipping, folding phone that we've heard some rumors about. Maybe they go like the Galaxy Z Flip or the Z Fold, and they have different iterations of that design. Something different here would be really nice to see. And speaking of form factor, one thing I'd love to see Apple do, but I don't think they're ever going to do, but I know a lot of people would love to see it, is to make an iPhone 14 Pro Mini. We know obviously the Mini lineup will not be continuing this year. Apple is going to get rid of the Mini due to sort of lack of interest, poor sales, maybe a combination of a lot of factors. There isn't going to be a Mini iPhone this year. But what if Apple was to bring it back in the future, but fix a lot of the Mini's shortcomings, or maybe more specifically, give the people what they want. And obviously, of course, this is a little ambitious. I don't think Apple's ever going to do this, but if we're just sort of dreaming for a second and thinking of ways that Apple could make the Pro end iPhones better and more compelling, I think a smaller size that didn't compromise on the big features would be nice to see. You'd have the same camera, you'd have the same screens, you'd have everything just in a smaller form factor and a smaller package. Yes, you'd lose out on battery life, but for a lot of people, they're willing to make that trade-off to get all those features. So I know before when I floated this idea, a lot of you guys were interested, and I'm curious now again, as I'm posing this question 1 year later, would you be interested in an iPhone 14 Pro Mini, even if it was $999, $1099, you're paying a premium? Would you love to have all the Pro and iPhone features in a smaller physical phone? Let me know your thoughts on a Pro Mini down below. Now I'll come back to the iPhone in just a moment, but let's switch gears and talk about some other products that Apple is currently working on and ways they could be improved, but it's looking at the competition. Specifically, let's talk about the Mac. New Macs with Apple Silicon are amazing, but there are still a couple of improvements that they could make. Again, like I alluded to earlier, Face ID in a Pro level Mac makes so much sense. And one of the theories I've heard is that the Face ID system is just too thick or too bulky to fit into the lid of a MacBook Pro. And I get it, it's sort of at the top there, it's a little bit thinner, and it just doesn't work. Apple could do a couple of things. I know this is very un-Apple-like, but one is they could build it into the bottom, like we've seen a lot of laptops do that have, Windows Hello, sort of their facial recognition tech. I know it's a little bit different, but sort of putting something at the bottom, even if it was just a sensor, would make sense. Or let's just sort of exclude laptops for a moment. Why not put it on their desktop products? I'm talking the Studio Display, the iMac, the Pro Display XDR. You've got a much thicker bezel and a lot more room to work with there. Wouldn't that be the perfect place to have Face ID? Now, one rumor that sort of floated around the Cupertino Labs for a while that many people wanted to see, with some hesitancy, was a touchscreen Mac. Obviously, Microsoft made waves, not only by sort of incorporating touch into way more components of Windows, but delivering some truly great experiences with their touch-first computers, like the Surface Studio, for example. Maybe Windows isn't super optimized for it in the best ways, but I think the idea of it makes a lot of sense for a lot of applications, and many people wanted Apple to do the same thing, and many people for many, many years have wanted Apple to create a touchscreen Mac. So could we ever see it? The answer there is both yes and no. I don't think we're going to see a touchscreen Mac in the traditional sense, what we think about as sort of a MacBook Air with a touchscreen. Probably not going to see that, but what we have heard as of late is that Apple is working on sort of a hybrid device, like an iPad mixed with a MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, some kind of hybrid of the two that would presumably give you the best of both worlds and allow you to have this full-on touchscreen Mac experience. Now, these next two are ones that personally I would love to see. Maybe they're a little controversial, and I'm not sure Apple is ever going to do them, and that is a round Apple Watch and a more affordable, lower cost Apple TV option. When it comes to the Apple Watch, I learned a whole lot about the insights into that design process from a recent book. It's called After Steve. I'll have it up on screen. You can check it out. Maybe we'll link it down below. A very enlightening, very fascinating book that gives you a lot of details and insights into Apple's behind-the-scene process and a lot of insight into Johnny Ive. And I learned so much about the Apple Watch and how Apple was really positioning this as a fashion-first device. And the round screen idea never came up, but really that just wasn't in the Apple Watch's DNA from the beginning. I would love to see a round screen, but I don't think it's ever gonna happen. Though I do think we've seen with many different Android watch manufacturers, the most famous I can think of is like the Moto 360, even with that flat tire, a round Apple Watch would be very, very cool to see. And then when it comes to the Apple TV, this one's a little bit trickier too. We've heard rumors that possibly Apple could be developing sort of this competition to these lower end Roku devices, some lower end Apple TV streaming stick or a box that gave you a lot of the premium Apple features at a more affordable price. Though this is sort of contested with the fact that Apple is sort of putting the Apple TV app on many different third-party boxes and on smart TVs. So I don't know if an Apple TV or a cheaper Apple TV makes sense because you can get sort of Apple content on other devices, though I do think something at the $99 price point would be very nice to see. Another controversial topic in the Apple world has been Pro apps, on whether or not Apple should put Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro and full-fledged Mac apps on the iPad. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me as of right now why they're not doing it, especially given the silicon power inside. But one of my wish list items would be, hey, to have this thing run full-fledged Mac apps or even just select full-fledged Pro apps would be really nice. And something else I'd love to see, and I know this is a little controversial too, but I think it'd be cool, is for Apple to take sort of a Samsung DeX approach to maybe the iPad Pro and to the iPhone 14 Pro or 15 Pro and give you some sort of full-fledged desktop Mac experience. Obviously, we've seen some weird implementations of Samsung DeX, and I think Motorola had their own thing for a while, and we've seen a couple iterations of this, but the idea behind this is very, very cool. And maybe it's a little bit more out there and a little bit more futuristic, but we know Apple's working on this. We've seen patents that suggest they are working on this. Sort of have that right now, a Stage Manager, sort of, but a more full-fledged desktop-like experience. It's something personally I would love to see. I'm curious if you guys agree, if that would be a cool feature or not. Let me know down below. So I know I covered a lot in this video, and let me just sort of be clear, sort of looking back at what I just said. I don't want this to come off as a rant, and I'm not trying to be critical of Apple. I'm not trying to be sort of difficult as an Apple fan. I love Apple. I'm enthusiastic about Apple. I love their products, and I'd love to see them get better. And I'm not immune to the changes happening in the other parts of the tech world. I love what Android phone makers are doing, and Microsoft and PC makers, and Apple's doing a lot of amazing things, but that doesn't mean they're perfect in every single category. So to have some of these features come over and make Apple devices even better would be something I'd love to see, and I'm curious if you guys agree with this list or not. What would you love to see Apple implement? Is there a feature from a specific Android phone or a PC you've used or something? What do you think Apple could learn from the competition, and how could it make Apple devices better? Do you think I'm in the right direction here, the wrong direction? Do you think Apple's perfect as it is? Do they have some things to learn? Let me know your thoughts on all this stuff down below. We can discuss and talk about what would really make the iPhone 14 worthy of its Pro price tag, and what other features could Apple add to make their products an even better value proposition and make their Pro products really worthy of that Pro name. Let me know your thoughts down below. We can discuss. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you so much. I'm Robert Rosenfeld from the Apple Circle, and I'll see you all in the next one.